Thank you for joining us on Ask the Experts. I'm your host, Tim Bogatz, and over the course of these episodes, I will be talking with art teaching experts and guiding us through a deep dive into a variety of different media. Each of the questions you hear today have been submitted by a member of our art teaching community. No matter if you are a veteran teacher looking for new ideas, a brand new teacher looking for some guidance, or an experienced teacher who wants to improve their practice, I hope that the advice shared here about teaching each medium can help you. As part of each episode, the show notes will include a plethora of resources to help your teaching if you want to learn even more. Today's guest is Andrew McCormick, and for those of you who don't know, Andrew was the co-host of Art Ed Radio with me for a long time at the beginning of the show, and even further back, the co-host of the live show we did called AOE Live. I am thrilled to have him back for an episode here, and for all of you longtime listeners, I hope this is a welcome surprise. And of course, we have a lot to chat about when it comes to sculpture. Andrew has been teaching sculpture forever. He has an MFA in sculpture, so I feel like everything has kind of come together for this episode. So let's bring him on, answer some questions from the community, and get the discussion going. All right, making his dramatic return to the show, Andrew McCormick. Andrew, welcome back. For those of the listeners that were not around in 2014, 2015, when we first started things, a literal decade ago, can you give us an introduction to just kind of what you've done as a teacher and then what you're doing now?
I'm Andrew McCormick. I teach mostly middle school / a little bit of high school art in the state of Iowa. I've been a teacher for 19 years. I've been in a couple different school districts, and yeah, Tim and I, we did this podcast for a few years, and yeah, I think we probably stopped it 5-6 years ago, or I kind of stopped doing it. I'm sorry, I stepped away from it a while ago. I needed to focus on some bigger, different things, predominantly just making sure my instruction was as good. I couldn't quite do the same things I wanted to. So, but yeah, and the reason I say I teach middle school and high school art, it's just by circumstance. Seems like for about the last, probably 12 years of my 19 years of teaching, I've always been in these weird hybrid buildings, which are like 7, 8, 9s or 8, 9s. So I teach 8th graders and 9th graders. Mostly teach 8th graders, but then I do a couple classes of 9th graders as well, that kind of intro level high school stuff.
Gotcha. All right. Now, the reason I wanted to have you on for sculpture is because you have a little bit of you have a sculpture background, and I've always been impressed with just sort of the creativity that goes into your sculpture lessons, sort of your willingness to experiment and try new things, try some different things, and do some really cool things with your kids. So super excited to chat about all of this with you. And are you ready to get some listener questions?
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
All right. So first one comes from Mario in New York. And Mario says, I'm having a hard time with all of the dangers that come with using plaster. I've heard you can burn yourself when it's heating up. I know breathing the dust is really bad. I just don't know if it's worth it for my art room. What are the projects you do with plaster, and how do you keep your students safe and healthy?
So it's funny, as a teacher, sometimes you don't even know what projects are going to become sort of your legacy projects. A student will tell you, I want to try this. I saw this. And then you try it. And then every year, every semester, kids come back and like, are we going to do the thing where we put plaster on our face and we're like quiet for a whole class period? So my very first job, I taught halftime high school and halftime elementary. And I did the group project where you kind of partner up and you put plaster on your face and you make kind of a cast of your face. And I remember the first semester, or maybe even two, kind of being like Mario, like a little bit like, oh gosh, things could go wrong. I've heard horrible things. And it always went well. I think in the 4 or 5 years that I taught there, doing it twice a year, once every semester with a bunch of kids, I had one time where it turned out poorly, where I felt a little bit bad for the kid, and it was literally just they got some plaster dust in their eye. It was like, okay, let's try to rinse that out. Let's try and see if we can get it out. But it wasn't any of the really nasty things that you've maybe heard of. So yes, plaster can become hot if you're not careful. I think the two main mistakes people do if they are doing any sort of casting of body parts where they're putting it on their arm in the form of a gauze or even like plaster of Paris or on their face. So I always did it with gauze, and gauze, the kind of pre plaster of Paris embedded gauze strips doesn't to me really have that issue. It's if you're taking a bag, a 50-pound bag, a 20-pound bag of plaster of Paris and mixing that with water, that's the stuff that I have found can get hot if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing is if you're mixing it with hot water, that plaster is going to set up much faster. And as a teacher, where you're like, oh, I've only got 43 minutes, I'll use hot water. Well, yes, you're going to get the kids getting their plaster to set up faster, but it is going to get hotter
Yeah.
too. It gets to that like chemical reaction speed a lot faster. So I always just made sure to use cold water. And yes, it takes longer to set up, but then you're not going to run the risk of getting that heat. The things that you see online where people are like, I got a first degree burn on my face or second degree burn, it's kind of a confluence of errors. They probably used hot water, and they also did not use, and I know this sounds weird, any sort of releasing agent to then get it off of
Right.
their face or their body part when it started to feel like, oh, this is really warm. So when we did the putting plaster strips on your face, and a lot of kids were like, this is gross and grody, but then they all kind of got into it. You got to make sure that you are putting Vaseline in the eyebrows, along the
Yep.
hairline, the kind of on the side of the face where maybe you've got some wispy hairs. We started just totally avoiding the eye and leaving the eyes hollow because the trying to put Vaseline on your eye or putting saran wrap over your eye, it just became a lot. And also, like kids when they're in high school, they're getting some peach fuzz, they're getting
Yes.
full on facial hair.
Yes.
Like you got to kind of put Vaseline everywhere. And some kids will be like, that's really that's a funky, weird experience. It feels like I got a facial. It cleaned out my pores. And then some kids are mortified because it rips off their makeup.
Yeah.
They look at the inside of their mask and it's like, oh my gosh, I need to go to the bathroom and touch back up. So that project to me, that is a lot. And I feel like doing the whole putting a plaster of Paris or plaster wrap on your face to create that mask is a cool project. But there's probably some things you could do first if it is your first rodeo with plaster. So one of the things I started doing was a plaster cast of like a zombie hand, like make a hand that is your hand.
Yes.
And it was a challenging project because the kids had to figure out, well, I can't just like unless you're using some really funky like silicone mold type of stuff. If you're doing it with plaster strips, you have to kind of make a halfway point around every finger,
Mm-hmm.
do half of it, put it back together, do the other half, join it together. And then we would paint those, we would kind of adorn those with something. And that was a cool project. And that one, it's like, okay, the worst thing that could happen is if someone misses a little Vaseline on their wrist, they're pulling a little bit of hair, but it's not eyebrows, hair along their hairline, all of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm. I've had very similar experiences, and I said I've never had a kid burn themselves or come close to burning themselves, but
Yeah.
like you said, it really takes a confluence of multiple errors. So just got to be careful. And I guess I would just put the disclaimer out, like whatever you're going to do with your students, try it yourself first, so you know exactly what's happening.
Right.
And then I'll just add a couple things as far as just logistics and safety and whatever else. I always just cover the table like a big garbage bag, and then it's usually super easy to clean up. I have masks available for all the kids so they're not breathing in the dust. I know that's always helpful for them. And then when you're mixing, like I said, don't use hot water, like you said, Andrew. And I would say don't mix too much at a time. I usually just use like small little 8-ounce cups. I'll put water in one, plaster in the other. get a craft stick, scoop the plaster into the water, form the island, put the plaster in until it starts to create an island.
Mhm.
Then you can stir it up and get that reaction going. And like you said, small amounts, cold water, shouldn't have any trouble with that. Yeah, you had a couple good examples of projects. I would add on, a lot of times when I mix that up, I will have kids just cast and they can carve or they can try and build. And we look at like Barbara Hepworth and Henry Moore, just, talk about form
Mhm.
and, a lot of the simple elements, and plaster, if you can get it smooth, can look really beautiful in that regard. So I think that works. And then I love doing armatures too, just like out of foil is usually the best because that holds up to plaster, whether you're doing the joint compound, the mix, the strips that you talked about. You can create figures, you can create whatever else you want to create. There's a lot of possibilities there if you just do a foil armature. So just some suggestions for you there, Mario,
Mhm.
as far as what you want to do. But Andrew, I appreciate the explanation
Yeah.
on, I don't know, how to keep it safe and just kind of the run through on what you did with it.
I did want to add, because it's one thing that even though I'm someone who has asthma, and it's like I often think the one thing I forget about or worry about, it's the last thing I think about is
Yeah.
ventilation, right? So making sure if you are going to be mixing up a lot of plaster, if you do have the luxury of having a little door and a patio and being able to step outside, that's great. If you don't, and you feel like you are going to be making a lot of dust, someone showed me this trick a few years ago, which is to take like a box fan, something that maybe you can buy fairly cheap at like a Walmart or something, like a $10-20 box fan. And this person was just duct taping like an air filter to the other
Okay.
side. So you turn it on and it pulls all the dust kind of through the fan.
Interesting.
And then when it hits that air filter, it like
Yeah.
stops moving. So I was like, oh, what a like cheap and like fast way. Now, that's not going to be like OSHA
Right.
certified, and you're not going to get like the really tiny particles. But I thought for something like clay dust or plaster dust or sawdust, if you know it's like a one time deal
Mm-hmm.
where you are going to be making more dust than maybe you want, I was like, that is a really low tech, quick and easy way to like minimize some of the dust you're making. Even just for the cleanliness sake, so you don't have dust everywhere and the janitors
Yeah.
get upset with you. It's like I caught, 70% of the dust is now all in this like little air filter that I can throw away that I, duct tape to this
Yeah,
box fan.
that's a really creative idea. I like that. I think it's worth
Yeah.
trying at least, seeing how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I've used it a couple times and it definitely does like pull stuff out of the air,
Okay,
which is cool.
awesome. All right, next question. This is from Reese in Oregon. And Reese says, I need ideas for inexpensive materials for sculpture. I'm out of budget money, but still a lot of time left in the semester. What can I do with cardboard? What other stuff might work? So, Andrew, any suggestions for cheap, inexpensive sculpture materials and what we can do with them?
Well, I mean, cardboard to me is like one of the most universal, ubiquitous materials out there. Everyone can get you cardboard.
Maybe the greatest art room material that's out there.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much you can do in terms of like venting it or like, just forming it. I always tell kids like people who weld, people who sew, it's that idea of taking a flat stock of material and figuring out ways of cutting it, scoring it, adhering it to make it be three-dimensional.
Yes.
So it could be mat board scraps, it could be shipping scraps. I do a lot with masks. I do a lot with portraiture. That's kind of my go-to, but you could make figures, you could do abstract work. One of the first sculpture assignments I used to teach when I taught an exclusive like high school sculpture one class is that notion of flat stock to three-dimensional form. So we would take some time and take a piece of chipboard, which is like what a cereal box would be made out of,
Hmm.
just making that be textured, funky with kind of like some two-dimensional treatments, and then curling it, scoring it, folding it, taping it, hot gluing it to make conical, different types of forms. And weirdly, so we looked at the work of Frank Stella, which is someone normally who is not be on my radar of like,
Right.
oh,
Right.
Frank Stella is one of my all-time favorite artists, but it really fit that assignment well. And I liked what the kids made. And it was like a week to 2 week project. I mean, it was pretty quick and easy. I will say one of my all-time favorite materials to mess with, if you can find it, is styrofoam. So like if anyone ever, if there's a big purchase in the district or people just happen to have styrofoam, you can cut it, you can shape it, you can re-hot glue it together. I had some students just this last semester who on kind of sketchbook days or like a open-ended day, they were just making the most amazing like Frank Lloyd Wright knockoff architecture things I'd ever seen. Just breaking off pieces, gluing them together, and this one goes here, and it's like this is awesome. So I remember once the PE department they got like 30 new exercise bikes and giant
Oh my
boxes,
gosh. It's like a
tons of
jackpot.
styrofoam. Oh, I know. And they were gonna throw it all away. And I was like, hey, are you guys throwing away that styrofoam? Because I could totally use that. Styrofoam is great. I love it. I do a project with styrofoam where we just call it like abstracted form. So we're looking at the work of Henry Moore. That's the second time
Yeah.
he's been referenced. But you can kind of melt styrofoam without like carving it. That is totally an outdoor thing because I go to Walmart and I buy like a propane torch for like that people use for like plumbing. And if you get just far enough away, you don't catch the styrofoam on fire, but you start to kind of like dissolve it or degrade it. And it's awesome. And kids are like, oh, we're playing with fire and we're melting stuff. But that does have some fumes. So when we do like our whole styrofoam melting thing, we definitely go outside for that one.
Fair. That makes sense. I want to follow up with the cardboard thing because as far as logistics and how you teach that, I'm on the same page with you and everything that you're showing kids. I generally show them the work of Kleis Oldenburg and taking small everyday objects, making them very big. And then I ask them to recreate an everyday object out of cardboard. And there's a lot of problem solving that goes into that. But remember one girl made like a 3-foot tall lipstick that, just made all of these cylinders, all of these cool angles. I loved it. We've had shoes and purses and all sorts of great things with that. So I think that's a really simple and really easy win for the teacher and for students. Just, teach them about how cardboard works, how you can set it up structurally, and then recreating an everyday object is always really good. As far as other cheap things, yeah, just anything that you can get donated, anything you can find can definitely be worthwhile. Found object sculptures like Louise Nevelson type stuff can be really, really good. And you can also go outside, incorporate some leaves, some sticks, some branches, some whatever you can find. Look at Andy Goldsworthy or other artists that are working outdoors, working in nature, and I think there's a lot there that you can do that obviously is very budget friendly, but you can get some interesting things done. And then I will just recommend, I have a very old article on the AOEU magazine, but it's still a really good one. I think it's called 6 Inexpensive Sculpture Ideas to Start the Year. And I just show some different stuff that I did with newspaper and oak tag and craft sticks and cardboard. But anyway, we'll put that in the show notes, and there are a lot of ideas there. So there's some good stuff out there that you can do for fairly cheap, I think.
And I think, what's the saying go that necessity is the mother of invention, right? So like just
Yes.
if you are hard up for materials, and we've all been there, and then it's like, why do I have 2 tons of this material but nothing else? It's like whatever that 2 tons of material is that you have is then the thing that we think creatively with working with. So I know like I had rolls and rolls and rolls of door decorating, like cheap paper and all these different
Oh,
rolls. So
yeah.
blue and
Yeah.
purple and red. And it's like, God, I'm never going to use all this stuff because, like, I don't know. It's not a great quality paper. Like, what am I going to do with this? So it's like, all right, we're banging out some paper mache. We're making our own paper mache stuff. So paper mache is another one of those things that I think sometimes it maybe gets a bad rap because it's like we've all had our horror stories with paper mache gone wrong.
Right.
Pretty cheap. I mean, if you got paper and you got some flour and water or some glue and water, like you can make a lot of stuff with paper.
A lot of possibilities out there
Yeah.
with that. So, yeah, good suggestion. All right. As I read this next question, I reminded we just talked about blowtorches not
Oh,
too
yeah,
long
yes.
ago. So this question is from Kyla in Missouri. And Kyla says, I have a lot of power tools and hand tools in my room left over by the last teacher. Which tools do you let students use and which ones are off limits? How do you decide?
Well, I don't, that's funny. I don't know if there's been a power tool that I've met that I didn't like that I felt was like off limits. I mean, but to be fair, we are not a wood shop, right? And we're not
Right.
necessarily trained to teach kids how to weld or how to use a table saw. Although, if you've got access to that stuff, I mean, I guess it's up to each teacher. And if they feel like they can adequately and safely demonstrate it to everyone, and if they've got the trust in their
Mhm.
students that I trust all the students in this class can handle this and are prepared. I know that I have had students in the past that when I say, here's a drill, I trust you, you can drill. And they give you that look in their face where it's like, I don't trust myself. The student doesn't trust themselves.
Yes.
Or I
Yes.
could do this for you. Like, I don't think there's any shame in doing that too. Like, you can explain to someone how to use a
Mhm.
tool, you can show them how to use that, you can give it to them. And if they are ultimately like afraid of the tool, that is not a great situation to be in. So I always tell
Right.
students, and I
Right.
learned this probably when I was like 12 and helping my dad out in the garage, like, you should never be afraid of a tool, but you should have respect of a tool. So, like, if you are
Yes.
afraid, you might make some bad choices or decisions, right? But you should have a good, healthy
Mhm.
respect for every tool to make sure you're using it the right way. And then I would just say, just be conscientious of the proper safety. So I wear ventilation, and then if you think you've explained it well, I don't know that there's a tool that I wouldn't feel comfortable letting a student use.
All right, good answer. I would just say to everybody that it depends on your own comfort level. You know your kids, you know your own skill. Like there's a lot that goes into it, but if you have any hesitation, if you feel uncomfortable at all,
Yeah.
don't do it. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. And I was actually thinking about my answer to this as you were answering there, and I think I came to the idea like if it can cause like a permanent injury, like if we can lose a finger, let's not do that. Let's not let students do that. And so, I'm good with them using the drill. I'm good with them doing a staple gun if we're adhering things or stretching canvas or whatever. But yeah, like the band saw, the table saw, like no, we don't need to mess with that. And that's where my comfort level is. And so I think, like I said, it's just up to everyone who knows their own comfort level. They know their own students, they know the tools they have, and it's up to you. But if you have any hesitation and you feel like the risks are far outweighing the benefits, just don't do it. Like there's no need to. And yeah, don't risk it.
It's funny. So I wanted to share a couple other things. So I had a woodshop teacher back in at college when I was getting my MFA, and he mentioned something in working with like undergrad students. He's like, if you can do it with a handsaw, why use a miter saw, like a power tool?
Yeah.
So he's always like steer students towards the sort of like least powerful yet effective means of getting the job done. And I think, like, right, like I could use a chainsaw for this, but like I could also do a little handsaw,
Yep.
right? So that has always guided me. Like, there's probably a better solution for what you want to do. There are always a couple tools that I've wanted to have in my art studio that I've never had. And I could see students legitimately being like turned off to them because they are a little intense. So like I've always wanted to have a drill press and I've always wanted to have a miter saw for
Mhm.
cutting like wood at an angle. But then when I think about those two tools, I would probably, if I had an ideal art room, use those tools a couple times a year. You know what I
Right.
mean? There's probably a
Right.
couple projects where those are really going to be handy. So then it's like, well, I get why a student who's 16, 17 years old who isn't taking a woods class would be like, I don't need to learn how to use the miter saw for this one project on this one day.
Yes.
And that's what I feel like as a teacher, you can show it off, you can teach it to them, but you can also be like, and I will be the one doing this when you tell me where you want it to be cut at, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. So currently, I don't have anything other than I do, like I said, I've got that propane torch that I keep hidden in my art room so only I can use
Yeah.
it. And like when it's time to use it, we all go outside together and I watch the students. I really don't have anything remotely dangerous. I guess I've got a couple power drills that we get out for one sculpture unit. And then when we're not using them, I put them away in the storage closet. No one gets them out. So I'm like, I have a pretty safe art room. A few weeks ago, I had a blow dryer out, and the blow dryer is just so students can like,
Okay.
I want to speed up this watercolor painting that is drying.
Mm-hmm.
I had a girl who she was blow drying, and I'm a bald human being, so I don't worry about hair care a whole lot. And I'm just like, are students not using like our blow dryer is not a thing anymore? Because I had students who are like, I don't know how to turn this on. How do I do this? How do I turn it off? And I'm like, it's the button. Read it. Up is on and down is off. And anyway, I had this student. She was blow drying her painting, and she kind of got too close to the blow dryer, and it pulled her own hair into the back of the blow dryer where it's like pulling air from.
Oh my gosh.
And she got her
Yes.
hair stuck in the blow dryer. And I was like, I am
Oh
so
my
sorry. And
goodness.
it ended up, it got hot. It kind of mangled it a little bit. So she had this little clump of, 20 strands of hair. I was just like, I don't know. So she just kind of like, eventually she just kind of like pulled it, which, caused a lot of, it didn't hurt her, but it's like, yeah, you just beat the heck out of your hair there. You need to go to like a stylist and like cut
Yeah.
your damaged ends off or something. But it's just funny. So as a teacher, it's like, you never know what students are going to run afoul of. It's like, I never would have thought I had to do like a blow dryer safety conversation, but now I do. Now I'm like, hey guys, if you're using the blow dryer, make sure you don't have super long hair, or if you do, tie it up, pull it back, whatever. So it was funny.
Yeah. It's always an adventure. Like, you never
Yeah,
know what's going to become
right.
dangerous, especially when you're working with middle
Yeah,
schoolers. Next question comes from Sylvie in Rhode Island. Sylvie says, "How do you convince kids that planning, sketches, etc., are a necessary part of the process?" That's a good question.
Well, I think you will probably answer that one better than I will, because personally, as an artist, that is not a strength area that I have. I'm impatient. I want to get going. I want to learn by doing. I want to make a project, have it be awful, and then scrap it and start over. So I'm a jump in, learn while you're doing, start over, throw it away type of person. I think if it's important to you, and I try to be well aware of that blind spot that I have in my own art making. So if it is important to you, my simple answer would be make it be part of their grade. And it's just like, I am going to grade your planning and your sketches. And I would definitely show the work of Christo and be like, so this work is not
Mhm.
really something that can be permanent. It's not something that can be commodified, but the sketches, the paintings, the drawings, like that can be. And I actually think some of those are really interesting. So I'll just tell you this one
Oh
story, and
yeah.
then I know you've got better answers for this. But I used to do a project that was based off of Kane's Arcade, which was the young boy who
Yes.
made like
I
arcade games out of cardboard. And we would do it in teams of like three or four. And some of the students way more gravitated towards the planning, the mathematics of the numbers and the angles and the layout and the drawing. Some students were far more into the aesthetics of what it would look like, the logos, the painting. And some were like, I want to cut and I want to hot glue and I want to build this. So I think if you do some collaborative sculpture, I think you could have students who it's like that is part of the role of the team is the sketching, the planning, the ideation of it.
Yeah, I like that. I will keep this as a short answer. Just say that, it goes all the way back to intro to art for me, where, we're having kids sketch, we're having them plan, we show them the process of doing that. And like you said, showing Christo and Jean-Claude is a great example. They're great sketches to go with some really amazing sculptures. So those always capture kids' attention. And if you can find other artists that do that as well, I mean, there are a plethora of examples out there. So just do a little bit of research and you can show them some good examples. But I think for a lot of kids, their resistance to that idea of planning and doing sketches is maybe a little bit impatient, a little bit of kids who are similar to you personality wise,
Right.
Andrew. But I think a lot of it too is just they don't know how. There's a lack of knowledge, there's a fear of failure or fear of doing things wrong. So I would suggest to Sylvie and to whoever else is thinking about this, just reflect a little bit, think a little bit on how you can break it down for students and make it accessible, make it doable, and it may need to be step 1 for your sketch is going to be this. Step 2 of your planning is going to look like this, and just kind of walk them through that until it becomes just a natural part of the process that you're doing with everything. But just show them how, and then once they know how, you should be able to get a little bit more buy-in, I would think. Next question for us. This is from Reagan in New Mexico. Reagan asks, what is your best sculpture project for students who are lacking in fine motor skills? That's another good question.
Well, boy, that's a tough one. I don't know if I've ever thought of one project that hits on that. I tend to think that, so when I have eighth graders come to me, I would actually say most of them have lower fine motor skills than I'm expecting them to have anyway. So it's kind of like a universal
Yeah.
thing. I just do a lot with paper mache armature. So when I say armature, I'm not even talking about like making a wire armature first, because I feel like that is too advanced for a lot of my eighth graders. We do that and get into that in ninth grade. I'm talking just like take a piece of paper, dip it in something gooey, turn it into like a spit wad. And I think most kids can like, okay, this is like a wadded up, like gooey thing. And then that builds up to something else. So I do a project where we kind of do like flat masks, and I feel like that's probably some of the lowest middle school like skills or fine motor skills that are required, because it's just take a piece of cardboard, draw some sort of mask shape, take wads of paper, and build it up from there. So another wad builds another wad, builds another wad. We do some tape with that, where if something's like too out of whack, it's like put some tape over it to kind of combine it down. I feel like to me, that's like a pretty universal thing. The one thing I would say though, so I have not had access to work with clay for many years. The building that I'm in isn't properly ventilated and doesn't have a kiln. So I haven't taught like
Okay.
clay for a long time. I feel like there's a lot you can do with clay sculpture, whether it's coil building, whether it's pinch pot. I mean, that's a pretty universal thing of just like messing with mud, right? I mean, like clay is mud, and
Yes.
whatever you do. I've done a decent amount with cellu clay, so just the paper pulp,
Okay.
because it does kind
Yeah.
of work and act like clay. Cellu clay was something that 7, 8 years ago, I thought was the most bogus, horrible thing in the world. I was like,
Okay.
what is this monstrosity of an art material? But when like that's kind of all you have that is kind of like clay, I've really come around to it. And now I am like a cellu clay disciple. I love it. The only
Okay.
thing I
Good to
don't love,
know.
yeah, I really, really like it. I make sure I buy like 50 to 100 pounds of it pretty much every year just to kind of have on tap for whatever a student might want to mess with. The only thing I don't like about it, I do not understand why this happens. It dries out your hands unlike any other substance I have ever used in my life. It
Interesting.
is worse than clay. It is the worst thing ever. So when we use cellu clay, I give my students gloves, like latex gloves, whatever the non-latex gloves are. I've got those too. And let me tell you, that's another thing that you have to keep hidden, because if you just have those out for anyone to grab, you've got water balloons,
Yes.
you've got cow
Yep.
udders, you've got
Yep.
air balloon. It's just like, no, these are hidden behind my desk. I get them out. You have to ask for them, and then I'll give them to you. But yeah, I really the cellu clay, I think you can do some really fun stuff with, especially if the fine motor skills are something you're worried about.
Yeah, I think that those are all good examples. I had just a couple extra ideas. Paper mache works great to do just abstract figures. They
Mhm.
don't need to have any features. It's got a head and some extremities. Like you're good. And we will do a armature with just newspaper and tape, and then paper mache over the top of that, and that can work fine. A lot of times we'll look at Keith Haring and do some different simple figures with cardboard or whatever other materials that are around. Those are easy ones. If you can cast anything with with plaster. That's maybe a little bit more advanced, but it's super fun if you know how to do that, to just cast an orange or whatever. Like, it doesn't take much, but you can do some simple casting, which is a lot of fun. And like making mobiles, just get a little bit of wire, some cardboard, talk about Alexander Calder or whoever else that makes good mobiles, and you can create some cool things with that. So there are a lot of ideas out there where you don't have to be super precise. Kids can still find some success with those.
So I'm not done talking about Clay. I want to talk more about Clay. So I did a project once, because again, not having clay, where it's like we looked at Funko Pops, and it's like trying to make things that are like more relevant or connecting to them. I mean, and it wasn't Funko Pops, but there's another one where like the figures are just so like minimal. It's like a bean of a body and a round head, and it's like, you're good. So we did a project around that, sort of like you can make any sort of pop culture reference you want with like just the easiest little like cylindrical body, round head, little like nubby arms, like no detail, right? And we're building it out. I think with that one, we even did like a paper armature or an aluminum foil armature, just to kind of make the body, right? And I've done that project a couple times, and it is now way better than the first time I did it. So the first time I did it, I have to share horror stories too, right? Like you have to share the worst things that ever happened. I actually think one of the toughest things with sculpture is not the materials, it's not the safety, it's not the know-how. The one thing that I think prevents a lot of art teachers from embarking on big, ambitious, funky sculptures is space and storage. Where the heck do you put all this stuff, right?
You're right.
And that is a real concern. And knowing like, where am I going to put 100 piñatas? Where am I going to put, 80 of these or 50 of these? That's a real problem. So anyway, I was doing this Funko Pop inspired project, and we had no storage, tons of kids. This is a nightmare. The only storage I had were in these shelves, and I opened up the shelves and I put them in there. And then I had to close the drawers, because otherwise kids were going to kick the doors and stumble over and whatever. Well, wet, mushy paper, dark space. We got them out the next Monday, and all the kids like, why is my panda moldy? Why is my Skeletor moldy? And it's like, oh my gosh, all of our sculptures had like gotten mold on them. And that was one of those things as a teacher where it's like, all right, we're pivoting. We're going to start over with a new project, because I'm not going to make you guys mess with these moldy clay things. So I know some teachers have had similar experiences with like paper mache, that paper mache can get moldy.
Okay, question from Anastasia in Ohio, and she says, most fun or most unique materials you have used for sculpture, looking for creative ideas.
So I already mentioned the one that I like the most, and I think kids like it the most, is styrofoam. If you can get chunks and blocks of styrofoam, you like I said, you melt it, you can carve it. There's multiple ways you can carve it. It is messy. So we'll sand it with like rasps and files, but it gets fluff and fuzz everywhere. Not that it's like, that stuff isn't like inhalable so much, because it's big chunks of it. It's static electricity. It's like clinging to their clothes. So if we do that, we usually do it over a garbage bin if we're really carving it, or if we go outside for the fumes. The other one that I do a lot that I think the kids like, but it becomes a bit of a logistical nightmare, is found objects. So buying stuff, bringing weird stuff in. So we did a project about like dollar store hacks, like how to buy some stuff at the Dollar Tree or dollar store and then mess with it and make it better and make it more funky and cool. The problem is students are forgetting to buy the stuff that they said they were going to buy. Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and here's my sketch. So they'd forget. So I ended up going to like the Dollar Tree and like buying $30-$40 worth of crap that then I didn't really need to or could afford to be doing that necessarily. So I think found object is fun, but be aware that either you might end up footing the bill or kids might be forgetful. So that's the one thing. And then whatever funky, weird stuff people donate to you. So my art room had like 30 cans of poly whatever it is, expanding foam, the stuff it great stuff.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we were doing
Yeah.
some weird, funky projects with that, but that was like a one semester thing. And then we kind of went through all the cans of that. But that's just, you never know what someone's going to donate or what you're going to find. So, but that was fun.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I'm kind of disappointed that you didn't talk about Celluclay one more time.
Oh, and sell you clay. Yeah, and sell you clay.
Going back to that idea that I mentioned with the cardboard objects, I had a kid who made a functional life-size couch out of cardboard. Like you could lay down on it. It was very long, could seat 3 people, and it was strong enough to hold out. Like she spent a lot of time figuring out the structure inside so it could support weight, and then made a really cool design on the exterior of it, and it looks so cool. So my reason for talking about that is that I think you don't have to take it all on yourself as the teacher to be creative. Like, let the kids come up with their own ideas with their own creativity. So you can give them the parameters of here's the material, here's our theme, go for it, and just kind of see what you can get. So open it up to them and see what their ideas are would be my biggest piece of advice. We've done sculptures with hot glue before. I went through way more hot glue than I thought, but just the change in thinking of like how you use a hot glue gun and how can you make this 3-dimensional. We talked about that earlier with cardboard going from 2 dimensions into 3. That's easy to do with lines, and we would just put the glue onto a mirror and then scrape it off, and you could build up from there or just build on itself the hot glue. So that took a lot of creativity. We got some pretty good results, but went through a lot of hot glue when we did that. It was a cool one though. Thinking about things that were donated, I got some giant chunks of wax one time, and we just like melted those down on a hot plate that I got from the thrift store and just painted them onto an armature and created these weird wax sculptures that were pretty interesting. It was a cool experience, but yeah, just whatever you can find around, whatever you have. And maybe that's the thing where you just say, hey, these are the materials we have, what can you all think of to build with them? That's an option as well.
I, I I have one more, and I can't believe I didn't say it. It has been a while since I've done this, but I always have bins of. So it's back to found materials, but it's a very specific found material, which is like old discarded technology. So
Yeah.
I would have people donate old computers, old VCRs, old whatevers, and letting kids get a couple screwdrivers, a hammer if needed, eye protection, of
Mhm.
course, and taking apart old technology to get out the
Yeah.
circuitry and the batteries and the motherboards and the switches and the buttons and the LEDs. So I just have big giant totes on a cart filled with disassembled old guts of computers and
Yeah.
stuff. And kids love looking at that stuff. They love
Oh, I
using
would
that
love
stuff.
looking at that
Do
stuff.
Oh, I mean, a lot of it's dusty as heck though, and the kids get dirty. And every once in a while, I did have a kid like they're trying to unscrew something, and they'll slip and they'll run their hand across the circuit
Right.
board that has
Yeah.
soldering on, and like, oh, I have a scratch on my hand. I mean, nothing major. We would use that a lot for found object stuff, like even like Louise Nevelson you mentioned before, like found object, but with sort of a technology kind of lean to it. And when I had students who were like, I don't have anything to do today, can I disassemble some more computers? I'm like, go for it, right? And it kept them busy and they were excited. So that, and that's one of those things I just put out a call to parents like, hey, if you've ever got old technology, old hardware, screws, nuts, bolts,
Mhm.
like we will take that and we will just have bins of that crap laying around to mess with.
That's fun. This is a side note, not about sculpture at all, but I had one of those bins of like screws and bolts and nuts and whatever stuff. And I had a kid do this super detailed graphite drawing. They like took a picture of that and just all the detail, just such a fascinating drawing. It was such a cool subject matter. Like took a ton of time, obviously, to get all that detail in there, but it turned out amazing. So. All right, last question. We've been at this for a while, so we finally made it to the last one. This is from Xander in Florida. Who are your favorite sculptors to show to students?
So funny thing, Tim, you know me pretty well. The first four that came to mind are all very traditional, formal, historical sort of like blue chip artists,
Yes.
and they're artists that's like, I wouldn't say they're like my favorite artists, but it's like they resonate with students. So
Mm-hmm.
Henry Moore for sure,
Yep.
Giacometti,
Mm-hmm.
Frank Stella, and Brancusi.
Yeah.
And it's like I just feel like they're kind of good when we're talking about form and abstraction.
Yep.
When we start talking about found object artists, I like Robert Rauschenberg a lot.
Mm-hmm.
One of my top all-time favorite artists. I love him.
Yeah.
But then I try to pull a lot from like, gosh, over the last few years, I've kind of gotten away from the filter of artists that I like. And I try to like, I show a lot of Instagram videos of artists that I've stumbled across.
Okay.
And I feel like those little snippets of like screen captures from my Instagram feed that when I show kids, it clicks a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna probably pronounce this artist, I'm gonna pronounce her name incorrectly. She's a Canadian artist, Laurence Valliers. I believe she's Canadian, I believe French Canadian. She does some awesome stuff with cardboard, and that's all she uses is cardboard. She makes these giant animals. And then there's a puppeteer that I like a lot, Sam Wilde. And again, it's just cardboard, but his puppets are like lifelike and they emote and they're awesome. And I think those have some of those more contemporary artists, and especially when kids know that they're on Instagram and they can go follow them themselves, kind of resonate more than like, here's Giacometti. And it's like they like
Mm-hmm.
Giacometti, but it's like, I don't know, some of that Instagram and those videos of how to's and tutorials resonate a little bit better with students these days.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, as teachers, we always find that more contemporary things, living artists always resonate with kids a little bit more. That being said, let me talk about Barbara Hepworth.
I mean, I started it with Brancusi. It's like, come on. Yeah.
Well, Bird in Space might be my favorite sculpture of all time. Like it's perfect. Yeah, I love Barbara Hepworth. I love showing her to the kids. I love Maya Lin, being able to tell the story of the Vietnam Memorial. Talk about another perfect artwork. Oh my goodness. And just her entire catalog of what she's done is just incredible. It has great meaning. And I also love Rachel Whitered, where she will cast in plaster entire rooms, entire libraries, entire like apartment buildings. And it's just fascinating to think about the logistics that go along with that. And students really seem to like her. And then anytime that we just need to get a discussion going, we'll get out Duchamp and his ready-mades, or just the minimalists like Carl Andre. Like he put a line of bricks on the floor. Like, that's it, and a lot of the minimalists didn't even put things together themselves. They just made directions for how to do it and then hired someone to do that for them. And that really angers the kids as well. Like they didn't even make it themselves. And so, yeah. So anyway, anytime we just need to get a discussion about, what does it mean to make art? Like who does this? Who created it? Who is the real artist? Like, those are the artists that I like to bring out. So I always enjoy showing them.
It's always good to make your students mad, right? Just get them really angry.
I was going to say good to make them think, but if you want to take that direction, that's fine. So cool. All right. Well, Andrew, it was great to have you back on the show. Great talking to you again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. This was fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you to Andrew for his expertise, for making a return visit to the show, and for answering all of our questions. If you want to continue your learning, I want to highlight a few of the links that you can find in the show notes. We will link to 3 different pro packs. 2 are on sculpture, 1 for elementary, 1 for all levels, plus a really interesting pro pack on exploring architecture through paper sculpture. Now, each of these pro packs have a ton of important knowledge, some great ideas for your art room, and importantly, how to teach those ideas, as well as some really interesting resources that you can use, as well as some resources your students can use. It's a great place to dive deep on some ideas about teaching sculpture. We are also linking to 3 collections from AOEU's Flex curriculum. One is called 2D to 3D, one is called Integrating Sculpture, and one is all about sculpting with cardboard. There are some very good lessons in there. And as always, the collections include videos, they include assessments, planning sheets, artist biographies, just other resources that your students can use. There are career cards. There's so much more inside of Flex. The depth that comes with those resources is incredible. We also have some additional resources that you might find worthwhile, including some podcasts with Andrew and with some other guests, and some magazine articles sharing some really good ideas for teaching sculpture. And finally, if you want to start on or maybe improve your own sculpture practice, we will include a link to the Art of Education University graduate course called Studio Sculpture. So please explore, enjoy, and find the resources that are right for you and for your students. We appreciate you listening to Ask the Experts. This show is produced, edited, and engineered by me, Tim Bogatz, and is part of the Art of Education University podcast network. Stick with us through all of our episodes as we explore photography, ceramics, painting, printmaking, drawing, sculpture, and more. Thank you for listening.